Hey, it's the Profit Answer Man, Rocky Lalvani. If you're new to the podcast, check out my interview with Mike Michalowicz. It's episode number 2. If you want to hear about each chapter in the Profit First book, go back and listen to episodes 3 through 13. Episode 1 is the why and how. On the Profit Answer Man, we learn money mastery without all the complicated accounting mumbo-jumbo using a simple system. Your accountant is busy documenting your transactions and creating a rearview mirror of what happened. My guess is you don't even look at the reports they sent you. If you're like most business owners, you struggle with this, and it's not your fault. We aren't taught money in school, and accountants aren't taught how to be profitable. The Profit First system created by Mike Michalowicz works, and he certified me to help you implement the system in your business. Remember, the new equation is sales minus profit equals expenses. Let's face it, without cash flow, you can't pay your employees, buy needed materials, or pay your mortgage and support your family. I help you to do that and more, so you can focus on the parts of the business you love and receive the rewards for your labor and investment into your business. The stronger you are as a business owner, the more jobs you create, the better we are as a country. Small business owners are the backbone of America, and for that, you deserve to be well rewarded. Just remember, more revenue does not equal more profit. That's why we focus on the bottom line. If you want to grow and scale your business, you need to let go. And you need to let others take control. Are they going to be as good as you? Maybe. But sometimes having people who can do it at 80% and having a bunch of them is a lot more productive than you being the bottleneck in your business. Today, we will also chat about how we do not become a commodity, because then we can command premium pricing and hire better people than us to work in our business. So we have the freedom and time to work on the business and enjoy the life we wanted when we started our business. Our guest today is going to chat about how to solve these problems in your business. Anthony Sabatino is a business coach and consultant with a holistic approach to growth and scale. He understands that while business is simple, people are complicated. Anthony is passionate about helping entrepreneurs and executives alike discover and utilize strategies that will help them efficiently scale while relieving negative pressure. Let's meet Anthony. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Anthony Sabatino. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on the show. Looking forward to it.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Absolutely. So my name is Anthony Sabatino. I am the CEO and founder of my company, ASPF Solutions. Basically, we're a business consulting company. We help businesses grow and scale in 2 major ways. We are located in New York City. We usually work one-on-one with companies usually around the medium size, both in revenue and staff. And we focus on 2 major areas, one of which being leveraging brand and ultimate presence and impact, and the second being company structure and delegation strategy.
And so we will dig into both of those. And I know one of the things that I read from you is the goal here is to distance your product or service as much as possible from becoming a commodity. I think in today's world, it's not hard to become a commodity, and it's also easier than ever to differentiate yourself from being a commodity. So how do people differentiate themselves?
Yeah, that's an amazing point there and a perfect question. So really what it comes down to is this, right? So as social media becomes more prevalent, what ends up happening, and this is just due to simple supply and demand of attention, what ends up happening is the normal everyday product or service that, let's say 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, that would have been, very desirable because it wasn't as attainable to everything else around us and as accessible. Nowadays is the complete opposite, right? It's extremely accessible. We've never had more access to product or services at our fingertips than ever before. So basically what happens is if we just basically hit the marketplace as, really not utilizing our uniqueness to whatever it is that we bring to the table, we automatically become a commodity by simply the definition of the remaining marketplace. So one of the strongest things that I really believe in, and like you kind of mentioned to it, it's not hard to become a commodity nowadays, right? So the bigger thing to me is ultimately diving into your creativity and uniqueness of what really you offer, whether that be a product, could be a service. Either way, there's always some mission of brand behind it all. And to me, the ultimate way to get out of becoming a commodity is to doubling down on what your mission and brand is. Because that's the only thing that really can't be taken away from you.
So can you give us an example of like what you mean by mission and brand?
Yeah. So, this kind of applies to, and a lot of people struggle with this as well, right? So I talk a lot about this in my content and certainly with clients that I work with. And usually what happens is they struggle with the differentiator between if they, or if they're selling a product or if they're providing a service, right? Because a lot of times the mission brand behind those two factors can differ quite a bit, right? So normally my always go-to answer is the application remains the same. It's the nitty-gritty of that, right? So what do I mean by mission and brand? Well, usually literally every single, product that you buy or service that you can purchase either for your, either as a business service as well as, go as simple as, landscaping services, right? Anything is purchased based around some ideology behind it that makes us emotionally connected to it, right? So you can look at things like Gymshark, right? Or, workout clothing that people buy. You can buy workout clothing literally anywhere. You could go to Walmart and buy, workout clothing if you really wanted to. But people are buying Gymshark based around their brand. And, you can say the same thing about watches, about, going to a movie theater or buying something on Netflix, about sneakers. It's all brand, it's all mission. And that's the emotional connection we're all striving for. And like we alluded to a little bit earlier about not becoming a commodity, all of those things, including, workout clothing, are commodities at its source. What differs is the brand and connection behind that commodity, which is what changes the buying process for the consumer standpoint.
Can a relatively small business, and by relatively small, we're talking, a 7-figure business owner, can he really stand out with a brand? And does he have the ability, or she, to be able to differentiate their pricing through something like that at that level?
Of course. It happens all the time, every day. So I'll give you, some macros examples here. A lot of companies that I work with that are living in that 7-figure range, the main thing that keeps them in that place is their traditionality behind their offering, right? So a lot of times the branding is tough to wrap our heads around because we feel so comfortable in a 7-figure range that it makes it very difficult to break and unlearn what got us there on the branding side of things because it's actually doing very successful.
I always say what got you here won't get you there.
Sure, exactly. So it's just that at scale, right? So like that in a business sense is exactly what that is.
What are kind of the first steps? Like as a business owner, what should they be thinking about to create a brand? Is there some easy guidelines to help them at least start thinking this way?
Definitely. So with me, it's a little different, right? So if you look at a service-based business, like myself, one of the best ways you can do this is providing some version of a hood ornament, right? Or some face to a brand. There's a human element that wins people over, that allows consumers to lean in more than anything, right? Is having that human element. The difference though is a lot of people, either they don't want to have a human element to their company structure, or they just don't feel like it's necessary and they don't want to go down that route of things. That's also plausible and totally acceptable as well. The difference to me, and the best guideline to always provide, and we can dig into this probably for hours here, is the understanding that we are striving for access when it comes down to a brand. So in terms of a guideline, right, you can structurize your offering and your branding strategy around access in ways that matters a whole lot more to the consumer. And again, we can actually get really deep on this, But to answer your question really, I guess in a micro way, the best guideline I can ever give in terms of what a company can do to really strategize in the correct way is to provide a level of access. And that access does not always have to be, giving a personal number out, right? It doesn't always have to be, anything that gives too much of you yourself away, because that might make you feel like a bottleneck. It might make you stressed out. It might make you anxious that you're giving too much away. So you want to really make sure that you're providing access in a way that even as a product company, you're giving your mission a home for your consumer to live in.
So can you explain that just so that the audience is clear? When you say giving them access, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, access is important because we literally are looking at that every single day. So think about the Gymshark example that I gave, right? You can actually say things like, I want to become part of this, something that's bigger than myself, something that's bigger than a product, right? Because like you said, it becomes a commodity so easily that if that's all we're getting, it kind of just it kind of puts this buying process and the leaning into a mission process at a halt. You know what I mean? So when we're buying into some access, it can be something like feeling like you're a part of what the company's mission is. So I always use the Gymshark example because it's so easily to point out. If we want to be part of some mission with Gymshark, so you can look at Gymshark's mission as, providing really amazing workout clothing that when you walk into the gym, when you walk into an outdoor activity, it really stands out. It's comfortable for you to work out in. It makes a lot of sense both functionally as well as aesthetically. So now you want to become more a part of that because it makes you feel good. So you want to support them because it makes you feel good to support that mission. Do you know what I mean? Does that kind of answer it?
It does. This is all about emotion versus logic.
Of course.
We're not selling features. We're selling a feeling.
Of course. And like you said, so I think that is prevalent everywhere in almost every source of business. That's exactly why I always say it's always applicable, whether you run a product or a service business, because it's always an emotion.
So one of the levers for profitability is pricing.
Mm-hmm.
How much have you seen a company be able to increase pricing because of branding?
Well, the sky's the limit there, unfortunately, right? So think about the biggest brands in the world. I always use clothing as a great example because there's probably no strong, or maybe even watches, right? Think about Rolex or, Patek, or you can look at sneakers like you have Jordan and Nike and things of that nature. These are products that they're selling for a major driving force upward of what it costs to make. But people are buying them so willingly and even buying them for regular pricing and then reselling them for a higher price because the brand is so strong. If you actually looked at the pricing, of buying and selling of what the profit margin would be, there's nobody that would even think twice about paying a mark that big. But the brand is dictating something completely different. The emotion attached to that brand of being able to walk out of the house with a really expensive shoe that not many people can get, it's the access. So we want to have things just by human behavior that it's hard to get because it makes us feel good. So when you think about how much you can up the price based on branding connection, the sky's the limit. You look at any example, and again, I gave two pretty simple examples there, but pretty much anything, right? Even cars, right? Think of the most expensive cars in the world. It's the brand of the car to drive down the block and have people turn their head as you pass.
And it doesn't always make sense.
No, it doesn't, but it makes sense to the consumer, and that's the point. So I always give this example as well, just to touch on that, because I think that's a great point. When you think about a $400,000 Rolls Royce, that seems like the craziest idea in the world to get from A to B. But the second that you sit down in the car and you feel the leather and you drive down the street and you feel that feeling of having that guy stop you at the red light and saying that's an amazing car, all of a sudden it starts making a little more sense to you, So it's providing that emotional connection, as long as you can financially support it, of course. It provides this emotional relief that all of a sudden surpasses the logic.
How long does it take to build a brand, and does it cost a lot of money?
that much money. What it can do, though.
Oh, wait, I think you cut out. Did you start answering immediately?
Yes.
Oh, we lost we lost the entire answer.
Okay. Can we edit that? Should I keep going?
I'll edit it. Just restart answering the question and I'll fix it.
Sure. So it doesn't take much time, and it also doesn't take a lot of money. It can absolutely, right? So I don't want to say it's a perfect science for either or. The main goal that I always like to provide, though, is that if you do it organically based on authenticity of what you bring to the table, people will lean into that a lot faster. The struggle point that a lot of businesses and brands face is that they automatically start off like they're 3 years into it and build a brand based on a facade of what they want to be known as, not what they are.
So it has to be real behind it. You have to be authentic because people will see that more and more. Well, I think today in the world of social media, being inauthentic tends to be the norm versus being authentic, unfortunately, especially in smaller brands.
You're right? But think about how effective that is for the people that are authentic. So just like with everything that even like we spoke about before with the, human behavior behind wanting something that's hard to get and that is different than everyone else and building on uniqueness. If we look at just the simplicity behind what you said, that the vast majority of people on social media are in fact inauthentic, wouldn't it be the best business strategy to actually be the one that is authentic?
It would be. It makes you unique then, right? You're the one and only.
Of course, but that's what everybody actually wants. So what's funny is we think about the opposite, though. So the whole process of being inauthentic on social media is based around the actual ideology of trying to be different. The attempt is to look unique by doing the same thing as everybody else because we think in our own heads, based on our own defense mechanisms, to try to want ourselves to be better than we are. We let our own desire of the brand we're trying to build outweigh the reality of what we're trying to build authentically. So we build facades and we build inauthenticity, which is what everybody does at the masses. So then you find the real people that come in, the real brands, the real people that are built on authenticity. And for whatever reason, they resonate more with the consumer and they're the ones that end up winning long term. It's more about a long-term versus short-term game, right? So if you're playing the inauthentic, just try to make a quick buck scheme based on your brand, yeah, maybe it might work for the first year or two. For sure, there's definitely brands that have made some pretty good money in revenue and high profitability using inauthentic branding strategies. 100%. It's happened. Is it the right play long-term? In my opinion, no. I think the truth always comes out in the end anyway, and pretty much every area of life. So in business, it shouldn't be any different. I would much rather see a company, and there's ways to do it. A lot of times this comes down to confusion of what to do. Because sometimes the authentic play is confusing and unsure how to execute.
And so sometimes we need help, and that's why we bring experts on to offer help. And if that's not your zone of genius, then find somebody to help you in that area. If it's your zone of genius, then find somebody to help you in the areas that it's not your zone of genius. We all have our skills, and we have to figure out how to find people who are different than us to fill in the gaps.
You're 100% right. 100% right. And that comes a lot down, by the way, to the delegation strategy, right? Of building an actual company is finding somebody with the weakness that you have with the strength that they have.
So let's talk about that, because that's the other thing is as we build our company and as we drive the top line, we've got to build a structure underneath that works well. And the business owner, more often than not, is the bottleneck. And so learning to delegate and get out of the way is a big part of that. What advice do you have in that area?
Yeah, so this is a very plentiful topic that companies that are 6, 7, 8, 9 figures all struggle with in some way, shape, or form. It's different, and sometimes the numbers get scarier, right, and bigger. But the biggest thing this comes down to foundationally is your ability to provide trust. So trust is very difficult to give when we're delegating, because a lot of times, from the leader's perspective, most of the time, the business is our baby. It's extremely hard to give up, a certain portion of control because we genuinely rationalize that our way is the best way. Now, sometimes that's true, it's rare, but the reality remains that 80% of somebody else is better than your 100% on everything. So we have to build a structure that foundationally supports the growth that you're saying. So a lot of times it comes down to your honesty of what your ambition is. If you're actually trying to build something as big as you say, and you're at the 6-7 figure mark and you're trying to get to 8 and 9 and 10, your honesty needs to play to your executions of structure. How well can you trust becomes the next play, because micromanaging is one of the worst things and the most resistance sourcing things that we can possibly do when we're attempting to delegate. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll hire people based on the insecurities that we have to think that that will fix us because we then get to help them pursue, which actually just creates more micromanagement. So you have to really be able to trust. How do we do that? Through a proper vetting process. So how well can we pre-qualify? How well can we vet to be able to give ourselves the wherewithal to be able to trust to the appropriate extent that we need to allow ourselves to remain not the bottleneck and allow the growth and scale to organically flourish.
So what are some of the factors that you're looking for when you're doing the vetting?
Yeah. So that can be a very specific question, right? So I don't love giving such general advice to something that could vary greatly, right? So when we're hiring, it depends extremely on the context of the business and what you're trying to hire for. That's the major key. So like, for example, if we're trying to make an involvement in some increase in our marketing efforts, and we know for a fact that current people we have in place are not supportive to our current ambition behind the marketing, well, that's going to be very different than if we're trying to evolve the operations side or the financial side, right? It really does depend a lot on who we're hiring. The way we vet at a macro, though, the best way I can answer this question without knowing a specific about a company is ensuring that we are hiring the ultimate weakness of what we have. So how do we vet that? Well, we ask ourselves and we ask the person that we're hiring, this varies by question, by the way, as well, in accordance to who we're hiring, whether it be finance, operations, marketing, things like that. But ultimately, what we're looking for is, can this person suffice my weakness? And we can ask that through a lot of different questions. But ultimately, we need to make sure that that's the bottom line. Because if we still are unsure about that, we have not vetted properly enough, and we will begin the process of micromanaging to try to rationalize our decision-making of hiring that person.
How often do you find that people are self-aware to know their strengths and weaknesses and honest enough to admit them?
I'd like to say often, but unfortunately not the case. So it is, and I think just even by the way you've contextually asked that question there, you understand how much that's rooted in it, right? So I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier where I had mentioned, we tend to hire people based on a lot of our insecurities of trying to help, right? Or trying to fix. So as a business owner, our major thing is to always make an impact on a consumer, usually solving a problem. So in a weird way, when we're hiring, we're almost using the same logic most of the time to rationalize the hiring process. A lot of times what that's rooting in is our insecurities to try to help and fix. So are we self-aware enough to push past that, to actually prioritize and put on a pedestal the ideology of building the company more so? That comes down to a lot of self-awareness work, a lot, right? And where are we struggling mentally and emotionally enough to look at ourselves deep enough to know what we actually need? Because a lot of times too, we have to remember that when we're hiring someone, we have to remember not to hire based on the outlook it might give outward to either a competitor or even someone that's close to us. What I mean by that is if we know we need help on the financials, like we're well aware, but the self-awareness and the insecurity within ourselves says, I want a bigger brand so more people know about me. So we hire 10 more marketing people. When reality says that we really should have put 3 of those people into the finances and hired and vetted them properly that way. Well, that's a problem, right? Because our insecurity of wanting a bigger brand, wanting more people to know us, feeding that ego state actually ruined the hiring process, and we didn't vet properly there.
And so when you said ruin the hiring process, you were hiring the wrong seats. You weren't appropriately
Correct.
hiring, were they? Okay, that makes it clear. I know you have one of the comments on your website, which I kind of laugh at, and it's the reason I built my business the way that I built it. Business is simple. people are complicated.
Yes.
What advice do you have is there a way to uncomplicate people?
I don't think there should be a reason to. And that's the interesting perspective. So I think at core, we're all complicated. And when I say the motto of the company, business is simple, people are complicated, what I'm referring to is as business leaders and owners, regardless of revenue and staff and size, we're all making decisions that are being influenced by our own emotions. So the more self-awareness we bring to the table and the more involvement that we bring to our own emotional intelligence, we begin to utilize our own decision-making as the leader, which then dictates and steers the entire ship of a company at a much higher degree. So to answer your question, I don't feel like there should be a reason to uncomplicate. I do think it's a constant catching yourself process and journey and marathon of coming back to a simpler way of doing things and understanding business truly is just buying and selling for a profit.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the other things that you talk about is sales processes. And that's the question I get a lot of times, especially around, as we play out budgets for the year, people are like, well, how do I know if I'm going to be able to hit that? How do I know if this is doable? It all seems like I'm just guessing. Do you have any advice on how to have better processes in place so that you can hit your actual targets and be clear on what the real targets should be?
Yeah. So, like I said, this is another one of those things where I think you can get really specific and really help a lot of companies when you take it to that specific level. I think at a macro, the best way you can do this is through systems, right? So when it comes to actual sales conversions and just sales systems in general, we want to make sure that our systems are in place to allow that to happen. Again, this is another amazing way of human behavior where we want something so massive and are not honest with our executions if they're in alignment to our ambition. If we're really trying to hit a number, number one, we have to make sure we're not creating ultra resistance to hitting that number because we're placing such a strict timeline on ourselves as the leader of that process. That happens a lot. Then we tend to overcomplicate. So the second that we put a timeline on something with sales, what I've found is we actually create a lot of resistance towards that exact ambition based on our executions in the meantime. In that interim period, we make a lot of issues as the leader, because usually companies of 6, 7, 8 figure, 9 figure, we're working with departments, we're working with employees, we're working with a staff around our sales conversions and numbers. We're leading that in some way, shape, or form. We have to make sure that if we're placing timelines and hitting numbers, that we're doing so in a way that doesn't create more resistance towards your team. Right? And again, that comes down to the emotional intelligence. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So where is the resistance coming from?
Normally, it's coming from the leader's perspective. And it's coming from the ideology that we've placed a strict timeline that other people are not on the same page on. So it comes back to effective communication there.
And that's usually the biggest problem, right? Effectively communicating, being clear and concise, and making sure that people hear what you said and understand it. Because too often there is a lot of miscommunication, unfortunately. And it's because we all have our own filters too. So when I hear you say something, I'm going to put it through my filter. Someone else will put it through their filter. And two people may walk away with a very different message from the same 100%. Comment.
So this is a very emotional based conversation, right? So how well as the leader can we provide and deploy some level of empathy to what we're communicating? That's very tough. And it's apparent and prevalent in every area of business communication, how effective we become at that, how empathetic we can become to who we're communicating to, and providing a structure foundationally that allows for that flow of communication that comes down to the company structure strategy. That is extremely beneficial.
A lot of different parts we need to think about. Is there anything that we missed today that you want to make sure that we get covered?
I would say other than what we've covered, right? So I think we've talked a lot about macro strategy here, right? And a lot of great topics that we can really allow some business leaders that are listening to this to then delve deeper and get some more insights into. To me, from here, the only way you're going to get to the micro nitty gritty of a lot of this is by then understanding how much accountability as the leader plays a role in this. So remember, we can listen to a podcast for 10 hours about all of this. The actual reality is nothing gets executed the appropriate way without the accountability of you, the leader, understanding that you're steering the ship in the first place. And I always love using that analogy of steering a ship because, like you said, we're all working with different filters and experiences of communication, especially when we're working with staff as well as executives. So when we're talking about putting something out there communication-wise and how effective that can be, the best you can do is be empathetic enough to that person to know how to communicate in the first place. Because at that point, it's going through their filters anyway.
So I love the idea of steering a ship, because if I think of taking a ship and, let's say I'm going to leave the coast of Florida and go off into the Caribbean, my guess is 99% of the time my ship is going to be off course. But if I'm constantly watching and adjusting, I'll end up where I want to be. But it's that constant little changes and course corrections as you get towards your bigger vision. And as you talk about leadership and accountability, it goes back to you started with the gym shorts. I do a lot better in the gym when I've got a trainer on top of my head than when I'm trying to do it alone. And I know that I get better results as well because they make small little course corrections that I can't even see sometimes and that I don't even know to look for.
100%. And the best part about having that, right, is having that accountability figure, right? There's no surprise as to why they're called that, right? Coaches, people that can help you in the moment. The reason they're called accountability figures is because they're forcing you as the executor to become accountable to your own actions, even if you miss something. Works the same way in business, works the same way in communication. We're looking for accountability in ways, even if we can't, root it from within, we still need it. It's still necessary to have the communication be as effective as our intentions.
And I think people sometimes get those confused. You as the business owner need to do the work. You just need someone to make sure that you're staying on top of it and you're doing what you're supposed to. If people would like to learn more about you, your company, and some of your solutions, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so I'm extremely active on Instagram. That's usually the best social media platform for communication with me. It's at Anthony Sabatino ASPF. You can always send me a direct email. My email is anthony@aspfsolutions.com. I'm extremely active through all areas of communication. So anybody who wants to reach out, learn a little bit more, I'd love to get a little more specific. Like I said, we talked very macro today. A lot of the specifics and micro solutions come from actual context. So yeah, if you'd like to reach out, Instagram is usually the best form of social communication, and email is always great as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated it.
We each have our unique strengths and weaknesses, and learning what they are is important. Then we have to learn to let go and trust others to do the work while we verify and we hold them accountable. Sometimes we also need our own accountability and the space to see the big picture of our business. Do you put time on your calendar to hold space to ensure that you spend time thinking about your business, your vision, your goals, and how to solve some of the problems instead of just working in your business all the time? All of the concepts that we talk about today lead to a more profitable business, and that's our goal. Remember, you don't need more resources, you need to be more resourceful. We focus on the bottom line. If you want a done-for-you service, you can have me as your Chief Profitability Officer, because you have your zone of genius and want to spend your time doing what you love. I only work with a handful of clients, so they get my full attention. I work with business owners who have or are growing to $500,000 to $5 million in revenue. You can use the scheduling link in the show notes to get on my calendar for a good fit conversation to see if I'm the right person to support you and how I can help you. If you want to learn about living the life of your dreams, check out my other podcast, Richer Soul. As we close out, let's repeat the mantra. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Have an abundant and profitable week.